Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Tim Flower is back home, everybody. For anybody who's been listening to his show and following his route around the world, he's been in many different destinations. I mean, how long's it been? How long were you away, Tim?
I left my house in February. I was out on the road for 7 weeks. When I left, my driveway was frozen solid.
Wow. That's amazing. And we're back in situ. I'm back in London. You're back in the US, and we welcome a very special guest, somebody we both used to work with a few years ago now, and that's the founder of Ellipsys, Seth White. Hi, Seth. How you doing?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you both. Friends from past, present, and future, as far as I'm concerned.
Lovely. And so Ellipsys is the name of your newish company. How old is Ellipsys now?
Yeah, Ellipsys has been going for about exactly 1 year, as of a couple of days ago. Exactly 1 year. Yes.
Happy birthday, Ellipsys. And I just assumed that, the name alluded to the ... you sometimes get at the end of a sentence. But when I Googled it, it was like a medical term. Or is this the ... Or?
No, it is the ... It is the ... actually, yes.
Excellent. And look, actually, from when I first joined NextThink, Seth, and I don't say it with any false flattery or exaggeration. You had like a literally legendary reputation in the organization. How's it been since you left NextThink? And I guess how's year one of Ellipsys been as well as part of that?
Yeah, it's actually been amazing. So, I mean, if I rewind a bit to being at NextThink, which was, of course, an incredible experience with great people, onboarding large enterprises across the globe with this technology and enabling them to be successful, and then noticing that in this space there is a natural, and it's natural with emerging technologies. There's always a natural lack of availability, perhaps attitude and also aptitude, right? The 3 A's when it comes to utilizing those technologies. And so that's where we said, look, there is no one out there, respectfully, right? No one out there who is laser focused on this. But we know the opportunity of value is absolutely staggering with DEX in general. And we thought, goodness me, there needs to be something's got to give. So yes, we launched Ellipsys with the idea of handpicking veterans and also experts in the DEX space to enable enterprises to maximize the value of those technologies. And in the past year, we're now at about 13 or 14 customers, right? Wow. Net new DEX, wrapping them with our services. And the actual amazing thing is that the people we've hired, of course, the people are at the core of everything. But yes, we've managed to handpick and attract some world-class talent, those who've ran some of the largest enterprises with NextThink, from the likes of Visa to Allstate Insurance to Starbucks. And these guys are coming in and making sure our customers, we're just kind of blowing their minds with what we can do with the technology above and beyond it as well. So yeah, it's been a really good journey so far. Thank you.
Sounds amazing. And by my measurement, your departure, Seth, coincided approximately with what was perhaps, the most significant, maybe transformative period in the history of the space, right? And
yeah.
So I never got the chance to ask you about it, I guess. But how have you perceived those key shifts in the market over the last couple of years, and what are the major challenges that have come with that, in your view?
Yeah, no, great question. So oddly enough, timing's everything. We always knew there would be some sort of shift at some point. We've been talking about it for years at NextThink, right? The market's going to shift, and finally, it kind of has. And it kind of by luck, to be fair, the timing of Ellipsys. It was more just the idea and the concept, and it was bubbling for a good year or two before we launched. But in terms of the market itself, what really became there are some widespread trends that were occurring from the pandemic, which kind of really started to put this on the map. Of course, the challenges of a distributed workforce, the rising costs in IT operations, right? The challenges of user productivity and satisfaction, and then the advent of the cloud and the constant variation of SaaS and web-based applications. And in other words, IT is just getting really, really complicated, right? It's getting really hard to keep your hand around it. to get your arms around it. Sorry. And so we launched, and here is, I guess, one of the major challenges that I see out there, very much for enterprises, which actually is something that we are looking to help enterprises with at Ellipsys, is to actually help them understand what DEX is. Right, the term DEX, digital employee experience, is actually quite all encompassing, and if you're not careful, it's quite hard to understand what it is, but also what it's not. And whilst it's attractive, I think one of the big challenges out there is for enterprises and IT leaders to really understand, what's the value of it, and how do I understand where it starts, stops, and continues. And so what we've been doing is seeing that as an issue. So a lot of people will come to us and say, yes, we're doing DEX, and a lot of this is happening, and they're not doing DEX. But what's happened is a lot of vendors out there, of course, there are some technology companies where they suddenly see spend on the term DEX, and they quickly update their website and say they do DEX, and they don't. And it's quite sad because some enterprises then have these new expectations of reactive to proactive IT. And they're using a technology which is completely backwards, and it's completely incompatible with even the idea of DEX. And that's one of the things. So it's in a sad way, enterprises are getting bombarded with messaging, but most of the people out there talking about DEX respectfully don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to its what it is, what it's not, how to use it, how to get value from it, the pitfalls, the opportunities, the value, etc., etc. So that's what we see.
So let's explore that a little bit, Seth. So this venture that you're growing, it's not a light switch, right? You didn't wake up one day and say, "Hey, suddenly Ellipsys is alive," right? It goes back to you really thinking of the need to do something bigger, something more impactful from a personal standpoint as well as for the market. And I think it's a great parallel for IT in general today. What we've been doing for decades, we've been doing it the same way, and there's time for something new. Right. And it changes every day, especially with these two technologies. Automation's been around forever. AI has blown up over the last couple of years. What AI has done for automation, it's becoming so advanced and so impactful. These two elements are increasingly integrated into IT. How do you see these two technologies, AI and automation, influencing the future of DEX strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely correct. So AI is, again, it's a fascinating topic in the in the world of DEX, because there are those who say AI is going to make DEX amazing, and then there are those kind of saying it's going to help, but be careful not to rely too much on AI, right? So that we're still in this very early sort of excitement phase around AI. For me, though, AI, I think there are three fundamental areas where AI is going to impact DEX and enable it even further. The first one is sort of proactive issue resolution. So obviously AI-driven monitoring, it sort of enables IT to detect and resolve friction points within the enterprise, right? So latency, app crashes, and login failures, etc. Especially well before the user reports them. So this transforms IT from sort of a break-fix model into a silent enabler of productivity. So that's one side. So it's really bringing out the pushing the envelope of proactive. Two, it's actually the personalization of DEX. So right now, DEX technologies are fantastic at understanding the consumption of IT across complex computing environments across a wide enterprise. But where there is a real big opportunity in AI, and what we're seeing at Ellipsys and what we're delving into, is how you can kind of take behavioral analytics and the machine learning, and then DEX platforms can tailor those experience right down to the individual level, right? So there's addressing the enterprise DEX, then there's the individual DEX. And that's the piece where actually, yes, we want to resolve enterprise-wide, but trying to personalize bringing DEX almost to feel like someone is DEX is outside in the hallway or the corridor of your enterprise is a really exciting concept as well. And then there is the third one, I would say, is sort of reinventing self-service, right? Reinventing the way in which users themselves are able to utilize AI technologies, LLMs, methodologies, and insights to improve, to take control of their own personal experience at times, right? And to make it just really easy, right? So And when you combine that with real intelligent automation, it's going to obviously help resolve issues instantly, right? With self-heal workflows, or and little to maybe less human intervention than was originally the case. So, and of course, that will reduce your ticket volume and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of IT operations as a whole. So those are the three ones. So yeah, I'd say like proactive resolution, yes, personalization, and then sort of reinventing self-service.
Cool. Yeah, lots to consider there. You and I, working together over the years, we've talked a lot, especially on the purchasing side of DEX. We talk a lot about not just what you outlined, the why to do it, but also how. So thinking about ROI and the value that doing everything that you just outlined, the value of doing that, what real steps can teams take to move beyond justification and deployment and onto successfully operationalizing their DEX visibility and realizing all of those benefits?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'll do my best not to labor on it for too long. So what we've done at Ellipsys is, and you're right, Tim, back to your point earlier, Ellipsys really was a culmination of years of working with large enterprises on seeing them on their DEX journeys and working with the leaders who bring these technologies in and are ultimately on the hook of getting the value. So at a fairly high level, one of the things that a lot of enterprises do is they first and foremost, right, they evaluate the technology at a technical level, which is great, right? What's the art of the possible? What are the features? What are the benefits? What can we do now that we couldn't do before? And then, of course, that when they make their purchase, they'll go into sort of a business justification, right? How do we justify this purchase? And so they'll put together a comprehensive business case. But then what's happening is they'll make the purchase, and then they will go back to technical mode as part of an implementation, and they'll live there, and they'll remain there, and they'll die there, because they don't ever, they think they're making progress with various tasks and activities, right? So they think progress is doing things, but they don't think about what they're doing in the context of the business outcomes, right? And that's the hardest thing to stitch together. So the question is, how do you do that? Well, one, the first thing is, at the earlier stages, what we saw over the years before launching Ellipsys was when a lot of enterprises would deploy, they'd go into what I call the use case frenzy mode, right? They list out 15 use cases and everyone's excited, and it's fine to have those desires to make progress. The problem is, when you don't know how to first and foremost understand the data that you're looking at, right, to truly interpret the data, but not only interpret the data in the context of your environment, it's actually a bigger job than you think. It's not as simple as throwing up a few dashboards and saying, yes, this application has a 70% crash rate, let's go do something about it, right? So data interpretation is one. The second one is actually aligning your business priorities. Now, most enterprises are actually pretty good at saying, here's what we want to achieve in the first 12 months or 24 months, but they often are they're business informed, right? They're interested in the business side, but oftentimes they overlook the actual data and what the DEX solution is telling them they should be doing, right? So marrying those two, business priorities and data outputs in the context of that environment, is really key. And then the third one, where actually Justin Dane, one of our service delivery directors, did a keynote presentation on this in Boston at Nextlink's annual event last year: governance and discovery, right? You don't just do things for the sake of doing them. You have to, before you put a use case in or you want to make a change to the environment, you have to understand, what's the impact? Should we do it? Why are we doing it? Is there another way to do it better? So governance and an intake process for the items you're trying to take care of. And then the other one is discovery. And discovery, I find, is actually one of the biggest issues that we saw before launching Ellipsys. Was a lot of enterprises, right? When major incidents occur or unexpected projects, or suddenly the immediate announcement of a divestiture or an acquisition, they rarely are actually prepared to utilize DEX to get the value from those unexpected but always likely to happen scenarios. So discovery means understanding before and during your deployments, what's our change management model look like? What does our communications process look like? How do we deploy and patch? What is the plumbing of the enterprise? And knowing that before you do things. And it's not the sexy work, right? This stuff that I've just outlined is a pretty boring and bland. If you don't do it though, you're going to have a CrowdStrike incident hit, and you'll say, how do we then, what do you go back to? Well, you're reactive, but with a DEX technology, right? And that defeats the object of it. So those are some three sort of early stage items I would say that enterprises can do. And that's sort of how we at least lead with our implementation of DEX technologies. There's many more I could go into, but those are just a few ideas.
You actually made a great point that I wanted to explore a little bit more, because it's not just about the technology. It's really not about the technology at all. When you think about it, we should never be doing IT just for IT's sake, right?
Mm-hmm.
IT is here for the business, to make the business better, more efficient, more profitable. How can IT leaders better connect those technical insights that they're getting, that discovery that you talk about, and all of that visibility? It's all great inbound information they never had before. How do you connect all of that to the right business outcomes and demonstrate value? And when I say value on the business side of the house as well as in IT. We tend to put the blinders on and say we need to show value to IT. We need to make our IT shop better. But the real reason we're doing this is to make the business better. So how do leaders connect the dots?
Yeah, so connecting those dots is tricky, and I think the biggest thing is actually setting expectations. I would say is the biggest thing, and it sounds very simple, but setting expectations and focus are the two areas that I would touch on there. So when it comes to setting expectations, a lot of the times when you make a business justification for a purchase, your expectations on implementation suddenly become, hey, we're going to print X dollars within the first 3 months, which is not realistic, right? It just isn't. And what happens is people knee jerk into trying to unnaturally force business value when you're not ready to yet, right? So what we say is that, so to your question of how do business leaders do it, is kind of set expectations as to what the definition of value is as part of the journey. Early on, yes, it's going to be a lot of tasks and activities in that journey. That is going to be your value, right? That's what value means. Value is a continuum. It doesn't stay the same, right? So at implementation and getting this thing rolled out, right, and getting yourselves together and organizing everything, your value really should be based upon progress through those items. But then for business leaders, then they have to kind of slowly change and not stay in task and activity mode. They need to then say, okay, as part of, now that we're out of that, what are we proactively remediating and why? Right. So then it's about stabilizing the environment, which is a term you use, Tim, for years, right? Stabilizing the environment proactively. And what I would say is making sure that you're not proactively, for leaders, this is a specific one, not proactively remediating things just because you can, right? So Starbucks had that very popular case where they had recurring issues on their endpoints. And instead of using NextThink, right, to remediate 16 sort of isolated problems that were occurring on endpoints, they decided to say, no, let's point this and look at it through the context of the infrastructure. And when you do that, well, suddenly they found they didn't have 16 issues. They had one huge SCCM problem, right? And so 54-step remediation later, they resolved that and they save 55,000 engineering hours per month, right? So that's what leaders need to do, is they can't just say, yes, do that, just fix that, do it. They have to think, is there something underlying here that we can do more? So that's another side. And then the other one, of course, is making sure that they are still starting, that they're moving towards the end in mind, right? The evolution of DEX. How do they become a DEX-driven digital workplace? To be DEX-driven means you have to listen to the data and act upon the business priorities, right? Don't be afraid to say we're going to use DEX for a strategic acquisition. Don't be afraid to say we're going to use DEX to transform the way in which we do hardware refresh or software license reclamation, or I just came off a call with our team, a customized use of DEX around 5.9 software for soft phones, and understanding the core quality on these types of technologies and pushing it further. So I think there's a bit of attitude in there and some practical in terms of setting expectations and then making sure they stabilize the environment. Sorry.
Yeah, and we've been using the See, Diagnose, Fix tagline on this to simplify the things that you can do. And everybody kind of obviously uh, navigates to the fact that, or gravitates to the fact that that's around fixing technology that's broken. But see,
Mhm.
diagnose, fix can also be seeing your asset management problem and finding the right diagnosis for that and
Mhm.
fixing that in a financial aspect. There's so many different nuances to what seeing and diagnosing and fixing things means that I think, like to your point, it gets a little drawn out, and it can, the definition of that can change over time. In my travels around the world, what I'm seeing, and you made reference to it, right? Folks just tacking on the word DEX to their platform, and we do it, but it's really not. It's not in their DNA. I'm seeing a lot of those warning signs from other providers that if I was still a technology buyer would cause me concern, right? We
Mm.
did the research, so you don't have to. Well, you're kind of fox in the hen house when you do that. I want to do my own research or leverage a third party to give me the unbiased view of it. But I really think that and I will call it a little bit of desperation out there in the marketplace, trying to keep up with what Nextink has built here. The technology is awesome. The operational expertise we have, along with partners like you, to actually bring it to bear in your environment
Yeah.
is huge. There's this concept now that it's bigger than just the tech or the team. It really is DEX Ops. It's the operational rigor that goes around it. But what should people watch for when they're evaluating those DEX technology providers to make sure they're making the right choice?
Yeah, no, it's a really good. I'd actually posted something recently on LinkedIn around this, so I'm actually, if it's okay, I'm going to cheat here and just go back to that because I think I want to see if my opinion has changed ever so slightly.
Reading his own
But
post, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, no, I just to remind myself because I put a lot of thought into that, and this actually might help with this one. So let me go here. Let me go to the show all my posts here. Yeah. So okay. So when it comes to the risks and pitfalls when it comes to evaluating technologies, there are a few things, right? First and foremost, as we've already kind of established so far, right, the opportunity is staggering with DEX. But here is the thing. The first thing to watch out for is really just the wrong technology, right? When someone comes in and says, we are a powerhouse ITSM platform, and suddenly now we do DEX, and your account executive or rep is suddenly your best friend out of nowhere because of this uh, this term DEX, be very, very wary. Look under the hood, right? A lot of the times, um, this goes back to enterprise people not realizing that real-time data gathering is not going to make you successful with DEX, right? Gathering information from multiple systems is not going to get you from reactive to proactive. Looking under the hood of the technologies very carefully, understanding their heritage is another one. So if you want to understand if DEX is going to add value for you and you have a vendor talking to you, question what their foundation was. Where did it come from? Why did they exist in the first place? If suddenly their heritage was, for example, yes, we were a very specific VDI right sizing tool, right? Okay, have they now built a complete architecture around DEX and what that looks like? Can they go into that level of detail? Most of the time they can't because their heritage is very different. The architecture of their technology is fundamentally flawed, and therefore they won't be able to get to the outcome. So the biggest thing I say when looking at technologies, look at the heritage and just look at the architecture and the roadmap, and that should tell you a lot. But before you do that, make sure that you're actually buying from partners or vendors who actually have experience with it. And very simple, whether he's your flavor of the month or you love him or hate him, but Elon Musk made it very, very clear, right? If you want to know if someone knows what they're talking about, ask them about it and see how much level of detail they can go into, right? When you talk to vendors or partners about DEX, 99% of them won't know what they're saying. They'll do the classic sales 101. So tell me about your problems. Well, DEX can help with that. That's not an answer. If these people you're working with don't have a strong opinion about what you're doing, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable for you, they don't know, right? And be very, very wary. And also, I'd say also beware of relationships. Relationships are great. Just because it's good doesn't mean you then spend millions of dollars on a DEX solution because you've just known that person for years. So sometimes there is a bias that happens in these purchase cycles. And then I think the other one to highlight as well, it really is, and it's at the core of Ellipsys, is do they actually know what value realization looks like in the context of DEX? Right? Are they talking about what happens after you buy? Most of them won't. Most of them won't. It'll be feature led. It'll be let's go to an event and get together for some drinks led. They rarely will talk about what happens after you make that purchase. If they can't go into great detail and then demonstrate people or process or approaches to make you successful, you're not going to be successful, right? So those are my three sort of high level ones I'd say on that.
And I guess the same would apply for picking the right partners, you know.
Yes, yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I would. And again, something I will say this. I'm very, very pleased and comfortable to say Ellipsys is the only company in the world who only does DEX. Now, some may say that's a disadvantage. For us, it's a hot knife through butter. Come to us about other things. Right now, the answer is no. We're not interested. We are relentlessly focused. And we're relentlessly focused because that's what customers need, right? Customers, Ellipsys didn't just come out of an idea. It really came from the core of listening to customers' experience on their journey with DEX. And that's why we exist. So yes, we are the only ones who only do this. It's all we do right now. And maybe things will evolve in the future. And DEX, of course, can mean lots of things. But for now, that's what we do as a business. And other partners, respectfully, they will be maybe experts in other areas, or they may be generalists, or they may be there as sort of an outsourced service provider who's simply there to maintain the cheapest possible contract to deliver you the bare minimum. That's not where you put emerging technologies, right? Emerging technologies they're new, they are disruptive, they involve differences of opinion with people and process and insights. There are so many things. Emerging technology doesn't live really with large partners, right? They're there because they have a groundswell and they've been around for years. But emerging technology, our belief at Ellipsys is that enterprises, these leaders, they are living well below their privileges with emerging technologies because they don't have the experience or the expertise or the resources to consume them and to get the value from them. And that's our mission.
All comes down to DEX ops at the moment, I feel, Tim. This is truly dominant.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got to rise above the tech itself, the even who you buy from. You got to have a great partner, but if you don't have an operational mindset and how to change how you operate, it really requires that operational discipline to get it right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think on the operational discipline piece, just to comment there really quick, is a lot of the times there is this idea that, oh my gosh, we have to have 5 people dedicated to this out of the gate.
Right.
You don't, right? You're not going to do everything overnight, right? If you did everything DEX could do overnight, then sure. But what you really need for most enterprises, obviously varying sizes and scales, but on average, from as low as half an FTE to 1 to 2 FTEs to get started, you can do immense damage in 12 months
Absolutely.
with that bandwidth. You do not need an army of 8 people out the gate.
But you already have an army of people doing the reactive stuff. So now you evolve them into not only new capability for you and your company, but they now have a career path, an exciting career evolution to what they're doing. And some will even rise through the ranks and become leaders that you didn't realize they could because of that spark that they get from a new discipline. So it's not about bringing net new people in. It's about evolving the teams that you already have to do something even bigger and better.
And looking ahead, finally, Seth, what excites you most about your journey professionally, and also the next stage as you see it for the DEX industry as a whole?
Yeah, the great thing about DEX is that it will and does kind of already involves various sort of technologies and approaches to the user experience, to the employee experience. There are a couple of thoughts there. So one, we are very excited because, how many technologies out there are considered emerging? Hundreds, right? There are so many, right? Let's narrow that down just into the DEX, ones that you could argue could be part of the DEX ecosystem. Again, absolutely tons. We know as a business, And we know there is so much, because we know that, right, that the key to the future of IT is typically in the emerging technologies. That's where you're really going to really drive your enterprise to evolve and move forward. So we as a business look at that and say, we know that most partners are not interested in emerging technology. Respectfully, they're very self-serving and they'll want to maintain the status quo business they have. And it takes them a long, long time before they even turn their head at something which requires a bit of maybe a longer sales cycle, maybe something that's not been budgeted before. So we kind of embrace that. We say, oh my gosh, there is so much opportunity to add value to enterprises who are trying to drive their digital workplace into the future. Right, there is tons. So for now, we're very much laser focused on the in the next thing space, etc. But we know that's going to expand, right? And there's going to be more and more opportunity. And then the other side that we're particularly excited for is actually continuing a bit of a personal thing here, is watching the careers evolve. Right, one of the greatest sense of satisfaction I've had in bringing DEX into enterprises is watching the single, double, or triple digit promotions that take place when these guys who take the risk, these guys and girls, they take the risk, right? And they have to live with the decision of the purchase they've made and watching it succeed. That is amazing, right? Being able to see people's careers say, "Oh my gosh, I'm the most popular person in the IT outfit, right? Because of DEX, right?" And I always warn them in their evaluations, you're going to get really popular. And then the other side of it as well is the convergence of DEX. Is DEX right now, I'd say, is somewhat heavily leaned on the IT operating side of things. But there is definitely a convergence taking place between IT and the business. So when we're talking about employee experience, we're now, looking at technologies as is NextThink, for example, when it comes to understanding how the business enables enterprises to consume those applications and services. So I see a convergence of the sort of the CHRO, I guess, or the CHO, Chief Human, CHRO, Chief Human. What's wrong with me? Why have I forgot the word? Human
resources.
Human resources. I was about to say relations. I was like, it's not relations. Chief Human Resources Officer and the CIO. I think that's going to be a really fascinating thing as we try to bridge the gap between employee and technology. So the opportunity is just endless. And our passion at Ellipsys is to take these technologies, maximize their value, and, as I say, redline them, push them beyond what they were originally built for, to make them so sticky so that customers can say, oh my gosh, I can't imagine living without this. And that's what we live for.
Passion comes through loud and clear, Seth.
It does.
That's good fun.
Wonderful to catch up and
of
hear
course,
what's
thank
going
you.
on. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. And this is a very timely chat. Me and Tim and I, we were just in a London boozer last week discussing some of these themes ourselves. So it's been great to have you on, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.